The ERP Doctors with Dan Aldrich and Sam Gupta, powered by Insight Jam.
Welcome to the ERP Doctor Show, your source for enterprise technology and ERP software news and commentary from me, Dan Aldrich of Partners to Innovate, and I'm here with my partner and co-doctor, Sam Gupta.
Yeah, this is an amazing show, always, Dan, always the best part of the week, I guess, personally for me. Quickly about me, Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm.
Thanks, Sam. So, yeah, I mean, me too, right? This is episode 5. I can't believe how time has flown by with our episodes here. We're having a lot of fun and hopefully providing a lot of value. We talk a lot about the issues of the week. We have a great team behind us from Solutions Review that's gathering news for us to analyze. Then we have, this week, we have a really nice interview with Paul Coetser, who is also known as the SAP Whisperer. Quite nice. And he will be talking about SAP things, but also just general business transformation type of topics, and how SAP customers move from SAP ECC to S/4HANA in the cloud. And but the first section we'll do is it's Sam and I talking about the news of the week. And so I'm going to dive right into that and pull up my list here so we can get started. Okay, so the first item here is Deltek announces CEO succession plan. So Deltek is a company that's project management software primarily. And they claim to be an ERP system, but it's more in the space of government and government contracting. At least that's been my experience. And they have a plan to have another CEO. And I think they want to focus more on their SaaS products and AI and things like that. So,
yeah. So, Jen, I'll give you some background overall in terms of Deltek. I would say your assessment is fairly spot on in terms of their focus, but they are most certainly a very prominent ERP vendor, even though the large majority of ERP vendors might not even know them, who they are, but they have a lot of different ERP products in their portfolio. You are spot on with your assessment that they play slightly more into the government contracting space. They play into the construction space, etc., architectural engineering firm, anything and everything that is going to be slightly more project-centric. So project management is their bread and butter, but we have seen them in manufacturing as well. So they are most certainly the ERP vendor. And I'll give you some colors in terms of this story where this is moving. And I don't really have as much background in terms of what may be happening at Deltek, but there have been a lot of changes overall in the past. And then I don't know how long you have been tracking them, but they were owned by Thoma Bravo, the private equity that we mentioned last time that QAD owns at this point of time. They used to own Deltek as well.
So but same one.
Yeah. So, but I mean, right now they don't own. So they exited Deltek, but right now it is owned by Roper Technologies, which is slightly a smaller private equity. They have a lot of companies in their portfolio, including some of the medical device companies. So their focus is slightly different the way they work. And that's where we have seen Deltek to be present in the manufacturing space. A lot of government contractors that are supplying medical-centric devices. So they play in those areas. Now, overall, from the ERP perspective, their strategy is going to be slightly similar to service-centric verticals. If you compare this with your IFSs of the world, Oracle ERP cloud of the world, they are going to have very similar market as well. But here, when you look at the pure play construction architectural firms, when you look at general contractors, you look at the subcons, they literally have the monopoly the way some of the companies, for example, let's say if you go to HVAC-centric spaces, that's where Epicor has a lot of monopoly. They are probably the go-to ERP vendor. So Deltek is very similar. Now, in terms of this movement, so if I look at the CEO's background, who is leaving versus the one who is coming. So if you notice the trend, the new CEO has the background in more of the HCM centric spaces. He comes from, I believe, Kronos, if my understanding is right.
UKG.
UKG, exactly. UKG is the merger of
Kronos, basically, right?
Exact. Kronos plus what is the other company? There were two companies that got merged together. I guess what is that? United Software or something? I believe
something like that. Yeah.
Right. So they created UKG. Obviously, UKG is a cool brand right now. And if you compare this with companies like Unit 4, and I think we have spoken about them as well, they have very, very, very similar strategy at this point of time. In fact, Workday we are covering today, Workday is taking very similar strategy as well. So these companies care for very HCM-centric experience, people-centric experience. In fact, a lot of ERP vendors call these spaces people-centric industries, people-centric experiences, and all of these ERP systems fall into that category. Now, why is this a change? So my suspicion is going to be that if you look at Workday's story today that we are going to cover in a second, they have very similar trend. This is all driven by AI. And the major play of AI is going to be in that HCM-centric play. So now the new CEO most likely is going to be because of that. I don't know if it is simply because the other CEO is retiring, whatever. But I mean, it seems very well aligned with the strategy that Deltek has. Also, it seems a great fit. That's why I'm super excited. So then I know I spoke a lot. Over to you.
I mean, my experience has been that it's been kind of desktop, kind of on-premise for government. And, it's a few years old, my experience, but I looked it up about SaaS. They do have SaaS, fully SaaS now, so it can operate on the cloud. But it was they had almost a monopoly. You said a monopoly. Not in construction because there's a lot of players there.
Yeah.
But more in the government and government contracting space. And I live in the DC area, right? So that's how I was exposed to it at like Department of Transportation and stuff like that. Everybody, all the contractors had Deltek, but it was desktop in those days anyway. So, but I think you're right. I think they're moving in that direction, the cloud direction, trying to get the AI in there, and the successor may be just retirement, or it may be just this is a better guy to equip them to go to the next level.
Yeah, so I'll provide some more colors there just for some more clarifications. So I guess Deltek also has a lot of ERP products as well as project management products in their portfolio. Some are going to be legacy, some may be super cloud native. So it's almost similar to your Epicor, ECI, Inforce of the world. They acquired a lot of products over the period of time. One of their critical differentiator is going to be in the government contracting space. And one of the things that they really have is government contracting data. So their play is very data centric and they are really driven by data. They own those data sets. And that's what makes their product so powerful. And that's why they have so much monopoly. So if you look at some of the CPQ workflows, or you look at things such as your DACA compliance, a lot of those things are driven by the proprietary data, and Deltek owns the CPQ workflows as well as the proprietary government contracting data. In fact, they have, if my recollection is right, they have databases of RFP. So anytime any government organization is going to release the RFP, typically that goes through Deltek platform. That's how powerful they are in these spaces. And I remember one of these stories from our episode that we have done on them. I think AWS uses Deltek. Can you believe this? For their government business. And if you look at the UI, it's super cloud native. Otherwise, companies like AWS, they won't use it. You have very large consulting companies using Deltek for their operations. Again, if anybody is going to be in the government business, they are most likely going to be using Deltek.
Yes. Great. All right. So let's move on to Workday because we'll fall a little behind here. We got like six of these guys to cover. So the first part of this is a two-parter actually. Workday announces intent to acquire HiredScore, which is an employment software company, and they're making strategic investments led by, of course, AI in order to basically redo their strategy. And they're strongest in HR, and financials are very strong as well. One of the original cloud HR MS, the market leader, basically. That's all on the cloud and in-memory database, I think, for Workday. So they're already kind of leading the market in several ways. But this acquisition of the HiredScore is more talent management and using AI to manage talent.
Yeah, so very interesting story. And again, I think we are going to see a lot of movements in the industry overall because of AI. But in my mind, this particular acquisition, if you look at the market, everybody is sort of trying to move into generative AI. But this would be more of the traditional AI, and they acquired this to augment their workflow in that talent lifecycle, in that applicant workflow lifecycle. So they are sort of expanding their capabilities in the HCM itself. HCM is a much broader category. It has many different pillars. Typically, the Workday was really, really strong in those enterprise workflows when you look at the transactional workflow of HR, but they were not as great at the sourcing, recruiting side of things. So this is really going to help them in reducing the lead time for talent, in making sure that they are able to use the scoring, I guess, from the AI perspective. So overall, it's very exciting. I don't know if that is timely or not, is a question in my mind.
Yeah, I think it is, actually, because the skills gap is bad and it's getting worse. Any kind of AI that can be used to improve that talent acquisition process, recruiting, any of those sorts of things, employee experience, right? Because these young Gen Xers or whatever, right? They need this really nice UI and an employee experience to be happy, so they don't go to another firm, right? So it's important in those ways for a company that uses Workday. It can be another tool that they can use to optimize their recruiting and their employee satisfaction.
Yeah, could not agree more.
Excellent. All right, so let's move on to the second parter of this second parter. So this is more about the strategic direction that they have with one gentleman is retiring, and they're focusing on, they have a new co-president, and they're focusing more on the kind of the ecosystem, co-pilots, those sorts of things, how to improve, but also how to improve the core of the Workday application. So that would be both the HRMS, and the accounting or financials.
Yeah. So overall intent of the story, I mean, the way I read it, Dan, so that is the path for $15 billion, I guess, in the revenue. I guess that's what they are aiming. And most of the SaaS companies right now, whether you talk about Salesforce or any of the hot companies that we have on Wall Street, they all are trying to increase the revenue as well as the market valuation. So they are figuring out, okay, how do we go to the next level, right? And that is the challenge that the majority of the companies that started as more of the SaaS app, they all are trying to expand. Now the question is going to be, who is doing what? Okay, so we have covered ServiceNow a lot. If you look at ServiceNow is taking very different strategy in terms of what they are doing. Salesforce is taking very different strategy overall. Now, for Workday is a very, 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 very different strategy. Okay, so now Workday is moving to the real ERP play, even though some people might question today whether they are real contender for ERP or not. For the most part, when you look at the Workday offering, again, I'll go back to my assessment, which is going to be when you look at the service-centric ERPs and your product-centric ERPs, they are two completely different divisions. The priorities that you are going to have for service-centric ERPs are very, very, very different. And that's where Workday really shines. They have been trying to expand to your service-centric portfolios, including construction. Can you believe this? Even though the only thing they have right now, if you look at their core product offering, obviously HCM is very, very, very strong. Finance is probably going to be okay. For the enterprise workflows, they have FP&A, which is a humongous need for public sector organizations as well as service-centric organizations. But then they also have the indirect procurement, okay, which is very deep, very strong. They have PSA, which is extremely common and unique in your service-centric workflows. So that's where I guess Workday can be positioned as an ERP in service-centric verticals. So now, in this particular article, they are talking about 6 different pillars. What is going to be their focus? And by the way, this article is coming from Acceleration Economy. And I guess Bob Evans has written this, I believe. And
he's great.
He is phenomenal. No questions there. So a couple of points that I would like to hit on is going to be enhance and improve the core, AI everywhere, industry-specific offerings, expanding the extend platform, delivering tailored experiences, continuing to champion cybersecurity. Some of these are slightly more technical, issues. Obviously, they are important, but I don't know how much they are going to drive the real revenue. For me, when I'm looking at an article that is talking about how they can get to there, I'm looking at some very strong strategic initiatives that is going to give them that opportunity to capture that market share. One of the problems that Workday has always experienced is when you create a product for enterprises, for example, our friends at SAP, okay, they are going to struggle to penetrate mid-market because mid-market is very different. They have very different priorities. They have very different appetite. So it requires a very different mindset and product architecture. That has been the challenge for Workday all the time. Now they are trying to go down market. They are trying to go global, and it's been a challenge. It's really been a challenge for them. They are not able to call themselves ERP because that's not how they are known. So all of these things are great, but I mean, their core is still very ACM centric. That's where they are going to invest a lot more in AI. Now, how that is going to translate in revenue is going to be a question in my mind.
Yeah, and kind of to me, the two that stand out, or the two that are most interesting to me, are industry specific offerings.
Yeah,
and you could see retail, hospitality, education, and government, financial services, and so on. All services based, right? No product based. So I see that they're kind of, staying away from that in terms of their verticals, but also the Extend platform, bringing in other third-party applications, which I guess would be something like a Salesforce bringing in a Rootstock or something like that, right? They can plug in some other, kinds of applications, but, given the verticals, they won't be product centric. They won't be other ERP systems, right?
Yeah.
They could be, because that's not their verticals.
Yeah.
That they're going for.
Some more colors there, I guess. Rootstock is a very SMB offering, so I don't know if they sort of overlap, to be completely honest. Okay, Workday is a very large...
True. Okay, good point. Good point. Yeah, Workday is enterprise level, and they wouldn't reach down. I was just trying to give an example of something that might be an application that could be plugged in as a third-party application.
But I mean, you do have some merit.
Portfolio.
You do have some merit in that point. So if you look at the Salesforce exposure at this point of time, they have very industry-specific CRM offering. And developing that on top of your vanilla CRM, even CRM, it's extremely difficult. It's not easy. We have seen all of those implementation, how difficult it gets to enable this functionality on top of these platforms. They all are going to claim that they are very customizable. But when you are going to enable all of these features, the way your data model is designed, it's still extremely hard. So that's why you see a lot more failure with, let's say, for example, Workday, if they are going to overstretch their capabilities. Okay, if they are simply acting as the ACM layer in a best-of-breed architecture in the enterprise play, where you are going to have either Oracle or SAP as the financial, they are going to be more of the ACM, then Salesforce is going to bring their own industry-specific capabilities more for CRM play. This makes it a great architecture. But when you are going to overstretch your capabilities and going to do something else that, you are not necessarily good at, that's where the problems are going to be in general. So the example that you are mentioning about Salesforce is just one, but then you are going to have other industry specific applications. For example, we have just reviewed Service Titan. Service Titan is a great, example of industries where you are going to have field service exposure, or that is going to be slightly more janitorial. Those are some of the apps. We have seen this integration with Procore. Procore is one of the largest SaaS app out there for construction, and pretty much every single construction organization is going to use that. So those are some of the apps that they are trying to bring in. But in the HCM portfolio itself, you have a lot that you can integrate. So that's where I think the Extend platform is going to be handy.
Good. So we're coming up on time now, but I tell you what, why don't we do one more and then we'll kind of pick it up in the third section there after the interview with Paul? Is that fine with you?
Yep.
It's like I definitely want to cover these. These are very interesting.
Yeah.
So the next one here is XLNC Technology partners with Cleo to help enterprises optimize supply chain operations through ecosystem integration. So this one here is XLNC is an Indian-based services firm, and Cleo is a company that does a lot of EDI. So there could be other connection methods in here, but it seems like they're focused on EDI, which is really interesting, very old technology, as we know. But in industries like automotive, for instance, and A&D, it's used very widely. And Cleo appears to be a vendor that's gotten this down pretty well. So in those kinds of verticals where EDI is a big deal, that they kind of focus on those. And XLNC is trying to have that capability for their customers.
Yeah, so very interesting story, and I don't know if I'm going to have a ton to add there, to be completely honest, in this particular story. But overall, when you look at different EDI platforms, they all are trying to become slightly more data platform. If you compare different EDI platforms that we have in the market, for example, SPS Commerce, True Commerce, and obviously Cleo, right? Cleo's position was slightly different in the market, okay? So they were positioned slightly more iPaaS integration platform along with your EDI, even though most of the iPaaS, they are going to claim that they have the EDI capabilities as well. For example, let's say if you look at Celigo. Celigo now claims that they have EDI capabilities. You don't have to go to SPS Commerce. You can develop all of those EDI workflows on that. But then you also have companies like True Commerce, which are trying to develop the control tower capability, or they are trying to become more of the supply chain, sort of collaboration platform, because their markets are being disrupted because all of these supply chain technologies, they are sort of replacing the EDI play. So now they have to do a lot more, right? So and I don't know, why this acquisition is there, why they are acquiring service-centric company, because this is a consulting acquisition. I don't know if they are trying to develop their professional services, but this is interesting acquisition is what I'm going to say.
I think they're trying to develop their professional services, and people keep trying to move forward with iPaaS and API technology and all of those sorts of things. And the auto industry and A&D, they keep dragging them back to the old technology, right? This is what we use. They have made some improvements. I mean, other vendors, well, I can speak for Infor, of course, that they have in the automotive vertical. They have a automotive exchange and EDI exchange that's basically has trading partners preset with OEMs like, car manufacturers, Ferrari, whatever it might be. And they have those kind of preset trading partners, and they can add those on for part suppliers. It's kind of a little bit better than just your garden variety build an EDI document with one vendor or whatever, right? A custom one. So I think it's about the same thing. So okay, I think we've got to move on to our interview. I'm really looking forward to Paul Coetser, the SAP Whisperer, and he is going to give us a lot of knowledge on the transfer process for ECC to S4HANA is what we kind of focus on. So I guess we'll go ahead and play the episode or the section 2.
Want more Insight Jam? Follow us on Instagram for exclusive content like a daily dose of best practices and buying advice from industry experts and leading solution providers. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel for long-form highlights from our expert panel discussions. And if you prefer to listen, please rate and review the Insight Jam podcast on Apple, Spotify, or Google. The Solutions Review team is hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so don't miss out. Now, let's get back to the show.
We're back with the ERP Doctor Show. This is the interview segment. And this week we have a gentleman known as the SAP Whisperer, Paul Coetser. He is an SAP expert, but he's also just a general business transformation expert on how you convert companies. And he focuses on SAP ECC, which is their on-premise ERP, to SAP S/4HANA conversions. And that is their cloud version that they have a deadline to go by 2027. And so there's a lot of conversions going on, and Paul's has done a lot of these sorts of conversions. So welcome, Paul. I wanted to ask you, first of all, on our first episode, we actually had one of your articles we discussed. It's an article about AI and ERP. And you were theorizing what it would be like if AI could essentially replace ERP, which is an interesting perspective. We thought, since you're a big ERP guy and with the number one vendor in ERP. So I wonder if you might just explain kind of what your thinking was there.
Yep. Thanks for having me on your show, Dan and Sam. It's an honor and a privilege. So the intent of the session and the commentary around the article was to stimulate thinking in a post monolithic ERP world, right? So I know we'll touch on composable ERP, etc., at a later date, but it was more to elicit and evoke some lateral thought processes around what does the world look like when we have achieved compute power such that you don't need 400 million lines of code, right? You have AI with sufficient power to actually answer a question straight off. Now, I did simplify the ERP stack in the commentary to go, it's basically predominantly structured data, a bunch of business logic and rules, and a UI. But what would happen in a world where it's so powerful, you could say to the system, who's today's vendors that I need to pay, and let's pay them. It would have sufficient compute power and knowledge to be able to do that without a monolithic structure between you and the data. And I firmly believe that day is coming. And I did comment in the article that I do believe it to be some distance away because of the compute and the amount of logic that's involved. But at a point, that compute power will reach a critical threshold and surpass it. And companies who have that kind of investment power would be able to harness that. So I was looking at a world where you don't need to install massive structures and have massive stuff. You subscribe to the compute services, compute as a service, and you would run that, and your data sets would be federated from anywhere. You wouldn't have to store or hoard them in an enterprise data platform and then try to manually federate them or link them up. You would have the power and the intelligence natively to link across all of that. And I firmly believe that's a world that's coming our way, but it will be some time still. But it was to open that conversation to the community and go, well, that day is coming. And the compute power is not that far from it.
Yeah, I mean, you raised so many interesting questions with that. I mean, we were kind of, Sam and I were kind of saying, well, it's a bit of a sensational thing to say, and, except, it's a long-term, prospect, and it's a possibility. And we were speculating that, hey, Gen AI can write code, right? OpenAI,
yep.
Copilots, things like that can actually write code. So theoretically, that's possible from that perspective. But I think you were talking about just rendering a session. So you say something like, I need to pay, or I need to enter some POs. Here's some data, and have the AI just kind of take the data in and put the data into the ERP system, or to the system, the database essentially, right?
Yeah.
So that then it could be processed all the way through. You've got invoices coming in and things like that. So
you would need to raise a full purchase requisition, then convert it to a purchase order, then go through a workflow and approval process. All of those processes would be merged into a single interaction transaction where you go raise a PO for maintenance orders on trucks at a mine site. and it would have sufficient business logic, rule, and understanding to perform all those transactions. Whereas a user sits and processes all of those, waits for the approvals, goes through the maintenance cycles, goes and looks at all the approved vendor lists, the stock on hand, etc. All of that can be automated and uplifted. So I hypothesized, in this world with sufficient compute power, imagine the value proposition it is to an enterprise if someone with a lot of skill only has to issue that instruction to the system and then can do higher value add work like preventative maintenance, analytics, etc. And the value proposition is profound, but it's all predicated on compute. So I was looking forward into the crystal ball, which is cloudy at times. I was going, if I had unlimited compute, what could I achieve? And I sort of concluded, well, traditional structure would become moot.
Yeah. So you also have, I think you were postulating like having a open source database.
Yeah.
For instance, right? And maybe to handle unstructured data, things like that. I mean, you wouldn't need a HANA or something for S4 HANA, right? That's the SAP database, which is interesting because your business model is SAP at the moment. So you were sort of thinking, hey, this is going to cannibalize my business at some point. But that would be fine if you would be out on the forefront of this whole creation of this kind of system, right?
So in a straight line thought process, absolutely, you would potentially deep six your own career investment. But if you look at it, we've been there before already, because before we moved to HANA, we had NEDB. You could run it on pretty much anything. As long as it's a structured RDBMS, it would run, right? There's some rules around it, but it would run. So all I'm saying is, let's look at a world where we could return to the client choosing any data source and structure, provided it's structured data. Again, the compute power comes into play to be able to interpret the information correctly, right, within the prescripts of that enterprise and how it operates in its industry vertical. But HANA has huge advantages, Oracle, in-memory database, SQL, they all have advantages, but they are proprietary structures. And so, again, my postulation was, what if we could break down those proprietary rules and indirect access and data access rules and go, we own the data, we don't care how it's reposited. How would that influence the world of business? And I would say it would be a positive influence, and the federation and socialization of data sets for the world at large would by and large improve. And so in a linear fashion, that would be an own goal, but not really, because if you look at the future state, that gives businesses greater flexibility, gives them access to different sources and different styles, and the ability to merge that information and create mashups, etc., without falling foul of 1,001 licensing rules and utilization rules.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice, right?
Oh, that'd be fabulous, right? And it would make the cost of business, more efficient and improve performance. So, if it's on a balance of scales, the pros significantly outweigh the cons. However, somebody's got to pull the short straw, and that would be the license and revenue structures on a proprietary entity, right? Yep. So again, that comes down to annuity, shareholder discussions, etc. But in the bigger scheme of things, from an enterprise point of view, it would be hugely beneficial, and it also allows smaller players in the market to punch above their weight.
Yeah, but don't you think that, SAP's got Joule, right? So don't you think that SAP can see this coming and say, well, we've got use cases for Joule, but it's limited, right? It's maybe some RPA on putting in invoices and matching to POs and things like that, and maybe looking at tolerance limits with AI or so, right? But it's quite limited within the ERP. Do you see them kind of catching up? Because they have said, hey, we're going to create a whole department. We talked about this, I think, last time. They created a whole department and a structure to infuse AI into everything that they do, right? So in essence, it seems like they might be headed towards rewriting or trying to rewrite their ERP with a Joule or some sort of AI capability. Do you think that would happen, or they don't? That would take them a while, right? Because they're tied into this monolithic structure, right? It's not going away anytime soon.
It
right?
can't go away, Dan. It's 418 or somewhere around there. Last count, I think it was 480 million lines of code, right? That's not going to go away anywhere time soon. So, as far as my knowledge extends, I'm doing some studies on it, but my knowledge extends on Jules. It's more a sidecar design than it is a fully integrated design.
Yep.
And the challenge SAP faces, if they do a wholesale code rewrite, they risk leaving behind a lot of really big and important clients who are not able to scale to that because they've announced it's only available on subscription, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going, again, I'm at that macro agnostic strategic value perspective where I'm going, if Joule has value, then why can't an ECC client who's still planning a move use it? Why can't an S4 on-premise client not use it? I know many clients who've spent in excess of $100 million on ECC and or S4.
Right.
And they would love to use Joule, but they either just don't have the dollars or they can't make the case for the jump and make another migration jump. So I gave that as a bit of background before I answered the second of your and third of your questions. Is they would retrofit and put Joule in onto the platform, and they would be able to do prescriptive logic tailoring and response tailoring to reduce the hallucination effects that AI, because they still suffer from it a fair deal. I run a couple of AIs at home here in my data center, and sometimes the responses I get beggar belief. So there's a lot of fine tuning that's got to happen, and SAP are not immune to it, but I absolutely understand that they recognize that. And some of the use cases today are a little nascent or amorphous, but they all tailor it very quickly. And interestingly enough, you should follow Dr. Kim Oosthuizen. She's the head of artificial intelligence at SAP. She's got some fabulous ideas and future state roadmaps on where that's going. But SAP, like Joule or any form of AI, SAP AI on the platform will have use cases. However, I will caveat it with this, is the quality of the data will determine your use case success. And also understand that the use cases are limited to the traditional ERP backend for the most parts, depending on your ecosystem sprawl, right? So a lot of clients are coming to me going, AI, I've got to jump on the bandwagon. I'm going, well, you can use a bit for for HR, a bit for the supply chain, but unless your data set and your ecosystem is geared for it, you're going to be limited in your ability to reap business benefit, right? So AI is, if you put it on top of junk, you're going to get junk 2.0, just like I said for HANA. What are you going to do when you go to HANA?
It's not just an AI question, right? I mean, data is a question. You're migrating from a system to a system. When you're upgrading, ECC has got a lot of junky data. Any monolithic old on-premise ERP system is full of bad data. So you have to go through a process of cleaning that up. And like Paul Burns said last week, he said, there's two things, the data and the change management.
Bingo.
Are huge in these projects, and I suspect that you definitely do not want your Joule learning on bad data cause hallucinations and whatever else. I don't even know what those things are called, right?
Look at Canada Air.
It comes out of AI on bad data.
Look at Canada Air. It was only a $500 mistake from a commercial point of view. But it went and wrote an entire new policy for a customer based on a query. And everyone had a good laugh at it, but that's a really good example. Now, extend that to the I like my gun-ho and gun-shy example of the spectrum. Imagine that happened in the medical profession and your bot gave some advice to somebody and there was...
Or operation or something like that.
Yeah, harm had come to an individual because of a bot's decision point. Suddenly it goes from a laugh and $500 to pretty serious
life.
Yeah. So I tell clients, I said, AI is the flavor of the moment, but before you put it in, like clients would ask me, what's the difference between ECC on any database to HANA? I said, well, If your data is poor, all you'll do is go from bad decision making to really fast bad decision making, because the underlying constructs are still poor. It's your cultural discipline that's going to help you get the business value. And if you put AI, forget about the brand, you put it on top of poor discipline on your technology landscape, you're going to spend half of your time, if not more, running around with fire extinguishers, because this system is pushing out responses based on your poor cultural discipline. So I'm 100% with Paul Byrne, the data and the consequential change management, because AI is almost instantaneous response. Means that, in the old days you had days or weeks to fix things. Now it goes and makes an utterance or a communication on your behalf, whether it's internal or to your customers. And you're running around with a fire extinguisher trying to put out hallucinations. And your board is asking you, what is this monster you've unleashed on the enterprise, right? And you did it with all the best.
And what's that data based on, right? It's single source of the truth. Is it the truth? I don't know. What is it based on? That
I'll give you a really, he has a really good example in terms of business partners or suppliers, depending on what language you use, vendors. I have Aldridge, space Dan. I have D.Aldridge. I have Dan.Aldridge, and I have Dan Aldridge. And I tell my system to send out a dunning or a payment reminder notice. The system should have gone and done a data match and gone, well, actually, all four of those suppliers in my system have the same address and contact information. I should send out the communication once. But the AI counted each one as a separate entity, and then in its own logic decided, you're multiple offender, you haven't paid, I'm going to send you a final notice and then trigger a notification to the lawyers to start recovery proceedings. Oops.
Yeah.
All predicated on poor data, right? And now you've gone and maybe potentially marred a 20-year experience with one of your best suppliers.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a good segue to another thing that I wanted to cover, stepping away from the AI from a moment and just saying, well, AI is too much right now. Let's focus on, let's move from ECC to S/4HANA Cloud. What are my strategies? Can you explain to me a little bit the RISE program? Because I don't really understand whether that's a product or a service or a database or a business process flows, or what is RISE? Can you explain it to me?
All right. Short answer, it's all of this.
Okay.
So RISE is SAP's latest attempt to get everybody onto the S4 wagon, and at the same time get them onto cloud, right? Because they've told Wall Street we're a cloud-first company, which they're not really. I have a very strong view on that. They're heading in that direction, but they're still a number of years away from being truly cloud-first. So they cobbled together the program. So there's a bunch of 5 of them at the last count. Apps. So you get S4, you get BTP, you get a
B2P is customization, right?
Is what the technology platform. Yeah. We can break those down in detail, perhaps in a different session. But
another session, yeah.
For the purposes of the audience, it's that it's got a bit of Signavio in it and a bit of a business network. Basically, it's just a free sugar hit to get you on board, to get you to have a feel of what it is, and it includes a couple of basic services like discovery that tells you where you are on your ECC journey, the things you need to change or get ready for. Before you go to S4, for example, you need to do CBI or business partner conversion. You need to upgrade to EHP8, etc. All right, so those are prereq steps you need to do, and then, okay, you're ready state, you can move to S4. So RISE is products. It is also some services. And then very, very importantly, there's the things you need to consider that are not in RISE. So the services that SAP offer in RISE are around the core. And you still, as a customer, need to, depending on your size and scale, need to go and find or source or continue to provide to the business between several and several hundred services around maintaining and owning and operating the platform. So that's what RISE is in a nutshell. It's with the S4, it's a grouping of starter pack apps. Put it this way, they're like a little, so 5 users, a little bit of process. You can go to
process in there.
Yeah. So a potential or prospective customer can go and have a taste and go, oh, okay, this is what it's all about. SAP's literature, in my view, and my SAP colleagues may have a different view. I believe they could have probably done a better job of presenting what it is and what it isn't in a slightly more digestible fashion. But SAP
I don't understand it. I'm not that bright, but
it took me a couple of goes. I'm not the brightest guy in the room, so it took me more than a few goes. I do have a pretty deep understanding of RISE. Probably one of the biggest things clients need to understand around RISE is the change in the commercial instruments. So your perpetual license you exchange for subscription in most instances, unless you negotiate it on-prem. And the FUI, so the full user equivalent, and how the license model changes is pretty profound, along with your entitlements. So I tell clients you need to understand and accept what it means now that you moved from an AnyDB to a proprietary DB, the app stack, Fiori, plus a subs model. So you need to understand what that business risk looks like, that one vendor owns an entire stack effectively, plus the services in the background on the platform. And that's not a bad thing. That's where most of the vendors are heading. You just need to be aware of the risk and then understand that when you engage commercially, your commercial instruments need to reflect that risk, and your engagement with SAP when you negotiate needs to have an equitable risk displacement, so that because the default license constructs are inherently biased towards the vendor, and that's true for Oracle or anyone else.
Yeah,
we're picking on SAP for this conversation, but it is common. So just make sure that your commercial instruments reflect the risk distribution, and you know what you're in for. But you really need to have somebody who understands what's not in the box. For example, there's no disaster recovery in RISE. You have to buy it.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you want a standalone and a DR instance, you need to go and spec for that. If you want a multi-tier platform like a 4-tier or 5-tier landscape, you need to go pay for each of those environments. And the other tendencies that sit around that, like Ariba, SuccessFactors, don't offer those natively. So if you had a 4-tier SAP landscape, which is very common, your cloud construct, SuccessFactors, has Devon Prod.
Huh. Okay.
So your test regime, you need to tailor like virtual harnesses, test braces. You need to have cohesion across your ecosystem, right? So these are suddenly considerations that come off, and RTO, recovery point objectives, and RTO, those are different and set by SAP up to a certain point.
Wow.
I have found with a number of clients that's not high enough. So we've had to negotiate some things there on a case-by-case basis. But a lot of clients' default uptime is higher. The threshold is higher than what's on offer. And to SAP's credit, they acknowledge that and they're working on that. But in a number of instances, we have to negotiate. So that's RISE in a nutshell. It's services and packages and a commercial construct. But that's SAP's sort of all aboard the SAP bus. You know, as you get on board and clip your ticket, you'll get some products, a taste of services, and we move you on to subs and cloud, and we can tell Wall Street we've got to win. So
you need an attorney sitting right by you, don't you?
I would strongly advise all clients.
Suggest. And then there's pricing, of course. You know, there's pricing and discounting and all those sorts of things.
And you've got to be careful.
It likely goes up with subscription, right? It tends to go up.
Yeah, you can't go down. So you've got to be very careful of your baseline as well, because the default in the commercial instruments are, if you start with X, you can scale up, but you cannot scale down. So with on-premise or perpetual, you can switch something off. You can stop using it. With subscription, it's more difficult, and there are rules around you're not allowed to drop below certain amounts for certain things. So you really have to go in with seasoned lawyers to a point, and with an advisor of some sort that understands the business ramifications, not just the commercial, because some of these services traverse multiple solution technologies, and you can't just pluck one out, because then the whole house comes down. So again, your technology people have moved closer to the commercial construct, to the architectural construct for the business.
I'm just learning tons of stuff, right? Just hearing you talk. But I wanted to see if you could tell me what the sort of the different approaches. There's brownfield and greenfield. If you could just give me a quick summary of all of that. Purple field, pink field, magenta field. I don't know which field.
Let's give them 15 seconds or so each. So
okay.
Greenfield, all new. So either you're an all new or what's called a net new SAP customer, and you're coming in and you start off all new and you design your processes, etc., from the ground up, new data, fresh, clean system.
Re-implementation.
In the instance of an existing customer, yes. Then you have a brownfield. So I'm currently on a version of an SAP product, be it ECC or Business One, etc. Move me over to S4, what's called technical migration. Don't change anything, only do the mandatory changes. So as little disruption as possible. I just want to change the underpinning technology version and leave it.
Right.
All right. Bluefield or selective data transition is a bit of a hybrid, is where you can bring over certain data sets, certain processes, etc. There are limitations and prescripts to what you can and can't bring over based on SAP rules, but it allows the business to do a hybrid. So I'll pick these good things and I'll leave those things within some limitations. That's pretty much the three approaches you can follow.
That is perfect. Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up for me. So I wish we had a little time to get into composable, but I think what we'll do is have a completely different session. We'd love to have you back on at some point, Paul. It's been great. Thank you for having me. Thank you for explaining these things to me that I was confused about. So I think that's it. Just wanted to thank you, like I said, and I think we'll move on to the break.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Paul.
Solutions Review is inviting you to join InsightJam.com. What started a few years ago as a social media event to celebrate enterprise technology has now grown into an always-on tech community with live events, discussions, videos, vendor showcases, and industry resources. Our vetted roster of experts, thought leaders, and analysts are sharing tips and tricks daily. So if you're interested in getting involved, join the long list of companies and brands who have already participated by visiting InsightJam.com today. Now back to the show.
Welcome back. We're here at the third section of our show, which is a Q&A with Sam and I, an analysis on any kinds of questions, but mostly we would like to focus on Paul Coetser this time around. Fantastic interview, I think. Such a brilliant guy. Yeah, exactly. 2 Pauls in a row. We have a third Paul, but then I promise we're done with Paul for a while. But anyway, I wanted to kind of turn it over to Sam and get your analysis, your thoughts on what I thought was a brilliant interview.
Yeah, so very interesting interview. And one of the things that I always say this, Dan, I like about these interviews, especially talking to these experts. I mean, Paul is phenomenal. There's no question there. Sometimes it's very hard for me to follow what he's trying to say, because he's probably in 2017 and I'm here in 2024, so it's very hard. But at the same time, he is phenomenal. He knows a lot. So I am going to offer my POV, and obviously you are going to have your POV as well, so we can do a little back and forth. So I'll hit on some of the points. So SAP deadline, that's how the interview started, which is wonderful, I guess. There are not much I can add there. That is fairly consistent with what he was trying to say. Overall, I agree with him a lot more in the interview. Then I'm going to have some disagreements. My disagreements are going to be very consistent with what I had mentioned in the first show, which is going to be around this whole idea of replacing the ERP. And I'll hit on some more points there, why I have my positioning in terms of why I believe that. Number one, the post-monolithic ERP era. Okay, so I think there is going to be some era like this, but I think what is going to happen is, depending upon how you define the ERP, is basically that's what is going to decide how that era is going to look like. A lot of people, when they think about ERP, they are simply looking at just one system to do it all, which is great. I mean, that's how ERP is known, but typically that is known in very, very, very smaller companies, okay? The larger companies, if you look at the best of breed architecture, they are probably going to use a lot of technologies. Even today, they are using a lot of technologies. In the enterprise play, they are probably going to have the best of breed architecture, which was already there. Now with composable, obviously that is going to change, but whatever is changing is anything and everything around ERP. In an architecture, there are two different concepts or maybe three different concepts, okay? So two different concepts are going to be, number one, your transactional processing that you are going to have, for which your processes need to be integrated. This is a very business-centric problem. I think I had described that in the first episode as well. Now, for technology people, it's a different problem. They look at this more from the technology lenses. So the second layer that you have in the architecture is going to be related to slightly more collaboration, workflow, experience. That's where you don't really require that tight correlation in data, tight correlation of your processes. You can be standalone. So that is a very different problem. That is a very different architecture. And then you have the third dimension there, which is slightly more data. And that's where you have the real play for AI. The AI workloads are going to be really on top of your data. In fact, if you look at the traditional enterprise architecture, the way IT organizations were structured, they were typically segmented into two different buckets, okay? One was slightly more transactional processing. The other one will always sort of the data department, data warehouse teams, whatever you want to call. These two teams had very, very, very different structure. They had very different, skill set. Even today, you are going to find that inside enterprises. The other comment that he touched is related to this whole compute power, and compute power is going to become so prevalent that it can probably write your ERP. Okay, so it can write code. In fact, let's try to relate it with the real world. Okay, writing code is the easiest thing to do in the world. Any intern that you are going to hire from your school, they can write code today, but can they implement an ERP? It's very hard. Okay, it takes roughly 10 years, 15 years to teach them what business processes are and why do we need to do what we need to do. Okay, so again, writing
the
code
logic,
is very...
also the logic behind like an MRP or so, right? That's a huge big deal. It's like
exactly.
The intent. You were saying originally, and I like what you said here. You said it's very good at transactional things and very bad at strategic things.
Procedural versus strategic.
When you're getting AI, how do you prompt an AI to say, look at the logic of material requirements planning, which is the engine of ERP, right? At least in a product-centric world, and redesign it or rebuild it or something like that. The intent behind it. I mean, this is brilliant guys that the original MRP guys were really brilliant guys, right? That wrote the logic for MRP to start the whole ERP revolution. And AI is not going to duplicate that fast.
Exactly. And I'll touch on some more points. I think it's called deterministic model versus indeterministic model, I guess. So when you are going to have very deterministic model where you are going to have finite number of variables, that's when you can model that, you can program that. That's where AI is going to be really good. Now, I'll touch on some more points. I'll keep going, I guess, in terms of compute power being available, and that is really replicating this massive, I call this magic wand. And to be completely honest, I think Paul has a lot superior crystal ball. I have one crystal ball that I bought from dollar store, so that's not as good, I guess. So he can see a far more. But in this particular case, when you look at compute power being available and whatever was possible from the infrastructure perspective, that is already there in the market. Okay, so and that's what is called cloud and SaaS. Okay, that is already happening in the market, and that's why we have so much power available. But did that change anything from the technology adoption? Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
For example, that's AWS, right? That computing power is there.
Exactly. But that
and
did
NVIDIA,
not...
combined with NVIDIA, right? We talked about NVIDIA and for the AI, the processing, the processors that are required for that kind of really intense processing power. But I think you're right. I mean, it's essentially there, and nobody has designed a system like that. And to be reasonable, he knows it's speculative, and he knows it's really to get somebody to get eyes on it, to some extent, right? But he really, if you read the article in detail, it's which you did a few weeks ago, it's really amazing. I mean, some of the thought processes that he's going through, and the whole issue of open source database versus a HANA or an Oracle. I mean, Oracle has a very old business model in the sense that, right, it's built on an Oracle database. Yeah. And it's very proprietary Oracle database, right? That doesn't live on an AWS or whatever. They have their own servers, I think, for cloud anyway. That's an old model. It's not open source. It's not, it's not even taking advantage of a third party like an AWS, right? Some people do it that way. Oracle does it that way. So, but anyway, at any rate, it's a long way down the road, right? AI rewriting ERP and it's monolithic now in a way, right? But it's not obsolete, and it's not dead, and it won't be dead for 15, 20 years. I can't foresee that anyway.
Yeah, so some very
interesting, the way the compute power and the AI is progressing. It could be it's ready in 6 months. I don't know. It's going to be rewriting ERP in 6 months. I don't know.
Yeah, so very interesting analysis there, and I'll touch one more point that you just mentioned. I think there needs to be some sort of clarification there as well. Overall, in terms of my positioning, I don't necessarily believe that any technology is legacy or old, okay? So even when you talk about EDI, sure, a lot of people are going to call that it is outdated, it is old, nobody should be using that. That's not how technologies are supposed to work. In some cases, there might be some technologies that might be completely outdated because nobody is using them, because they are not able to adopt, they are not getting enough champions. That could be the reason. But as such, when you look at the fundamental merits of these technologies, okay, EDI was designed for a specific purpose. When you look at EDI even today is one of the most prevalent technology out there for any B2B communication, okay? API is not necessarily replacement for EDI. The same thing goes for database technologies, okay? You have SQL technologies or SQL-centric or relational databases, and then you have the NoSQL databases, okay? There might be some improvements overall, but as such, nothing is being replaced, or, these technologies are not necessarily outdated. They have a role to play, and generally, you need to go back to the fundamentals of how and what they are prioritizing, and based on that priority, typically you are going to see the outcome, and typically these are going to be things that are going to be in balance. For example, when you look at things such as your availability, scalability, and I don't know what is that CAP theorem, consistency, availability, as well as performance, I guess. That's the fundamental theorem for database, and typically SQL is going to be good at one thing, the NoSQL is going to be good at another thing. Now, going back to some more analysis overall from the interview perspective, when you look at these, again, AI-centric workflow, they are good at creating stories from data. That's what they can do. But can they process the real transaction? Can it create the structure for the real transaction? It's very, very, very hard for AI. I'm saying that, I don't necessarily see AI replacing ERP. ERP is always going to be there. In fact, I mean, when you compare when you really analyze the whole interview, so he's still saying that, data related problems are always going to be there. The change management related problems are always going to be there. Okay. The only condition when ERP can be automated or ERP can be automatically generated when you are going to remove every single human and every single human input from ERP. And that is the day that none of us want to see. Okay, so the problems. The problems that we have.
He says, like Paul Burns said last week. I mean, he was talking about his phase 0. It's all based on people. It's all based on change management. And you and I agree that whenever you're doing a business transformation, I won't call it a digital transformation. I'll call it a business transformation. When you're doing that, people is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Processes second, and technology last. Right. So this solution that if it is, as you say, that an AI-driven ERP is people-less, there's no people in it, then we got a problem, right? Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, and I think there are layers to AI-driven ERP as well. When they say AI-driven ERP, AI can augment workflows. That's where the magic of AI is. So you are going to have AI detecting anomalies. AI can improve your workflow, and AI can do study. AI can provide inputs, but again, can it process the transactions? No. That's where the real difference is. In AI.
Right. And I saw, for example, the SAP Joule that we mentioned, in addition to the use case of POs and invoices and things like that, and, automation of those processes, there was also, I just watched a video of Joule in action to create financial statements and create, here's my annual report based on my data versus budget, and, just prompts like that, like a Gen AI prompt to say, give me financial statements. It was great. If that's a real thing, I don't know, it's a demo video, but, but assuming that's a real thing, that is AI. That is SAP Joule capability. And it can really help. I mean, the productivity, you can think about the productivity that comes with being able to, it takes, an army of accountants at month end to come up with financial statements 2 or 3 days, to close the month. And I can just type in, give me my financial statements in the format of a PowerPoint presentation that I can give to the board. That's amazing. That's amazing. So I think that's what he was kind of talking about. And man, this is great. See, we're probably way over time now, but I don't care, because I think this is really important for us to talk about it. And I'm going to hold on to the composable, because that's a whole other thing in and of itself. And we can circle back, because we had Ronald and Jan and all of those talking more about that. And I'd like to sort of combine that story with an ERP story as well, with the corporate and with my manufacturing plants. And I got some ideas on that we can talk about sometime in the near future. But I think we got a break this time, Sam. Sorry to say that.
No, let's make it.
We'd love to have you guys back next week. So have a great weekend. Bye-bye.